last month, Quebec became the first province in Canada to ban the burqa. Here in Europe, Austria has introduced a fine of £130 for women who cover their faces. Similar restrictions in place in France, in Belgium, in Bulgaria, and in the Netherlands as well. Now Scottish Muslim writer Paigham Mustafa is calling on Britain to ban the burqa. He joins me now. Paigham, good morning. Thanks for your time this morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
What's your reason for this?
Well, first of all, I think we have to ask the question, why wear the burqa anyway? The claim is that the burqa is an Islamic dress. But first and foremost, the most important point to make is that for Muslims, the Quran is a criteria in this matter, and it's not an obligation in the Quran. But sadly, the burqa has wrongly become a symbol of Islam. But to hide the body in a gown and to obscure facial features is bizarre and cruel, I believe, especially when women are indoctrinated to falsely believe it is God who decrees such a dress code, when there's no evidence for it.
Here's a text from Scott in Troon. Surely the oppressive thing here would be to ban the burqa and remove a woman's right to choose what she wants to wear. Would you ban a nun's habit? Shouldn't this be down to individual choice?
Well, a nun's habit doesn't cover the whole body and the whole face. With the burqa, which covers a woman from head to toe, there are lots of issues associated with it as well. It creates a barrier where no barrier needs to be created. If the claim is that it's Islamic, then that claim is wrong, because there's nothing in the Quran which dictates that a burqa should be worn.
So your concern is the face covering, is the fact that if there are tensions in society, this could exacerbate tensions?
Yes, of course, because it creates, as I said, a barrier where there doesn't need to be a barrier. And there's no social interaction as well. So the women who are wearing the burqa are actually less socially active than someone who isn't.
How do you know that?
Well, how do they interact with people?
No, how do you know that they are less social? How do you know that they're not perfectly comfortable in the world and in what they choose to wear?
Well, first of all, their belief that this is a religious decree is wrong. So if they were socially aware, if they knew the Quran, then they would know that it isn't.
So you believe it's a problem of interpretation, and it's a relatively modern problem of interpretation as well?
Well, it is a relatively modern interpretation, because if you look into history, it was early in the 1920s when Mustafa Kemal Ataturk encouraged Turkish women to give up the veil. And in 1958, it was Gamal Abdel Nasser in Egypt who declined to capitulate to the Muslim Brotherhood's demand for the veil. And also in the 1980s, Imam Khomeini agreed that the chadr is not obligatory. That's an overall covering, but modest dress should be. So this is a fairly modern phenomenon.
Men seem to play a big part in this discussion, don't they? From imams who may be saying it's a good thing to, the scholars you've also mentioned, through to yourself telling women what to do.
Well, the thing is this, the burqa is not a fashion statement. It's a religious statement, and the real reason has more to do with the fact that some men in some cultures are insecure and they harbour a deep distrust of their women. Imposing the veil suggests that these men suspect their mothers, sisters, wives, daughters of being potential traitors. Do they really think that their women are inherently corrupt or easily seduced?
So you think this is a male thing, this is a male control thing?
Yes, it is. It definitely is, because there is no decree in the Quran for it. So why is it being imposed? This is more of a cultural thing, more of, I would say, Arab cultural thing than anything else. Let
me bring Samina Akhtar in at this stage, former director at Amina, the Muslim Women's Resource Centre. Samina, good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for your time this morning. You've been listening to what Paigham had to say there. What do you say to that?
I would say that why are you focusing on 0.001% of women, and why do you actually want to see a woman's body anyway? What's the problem? And the thing about the Quran, whether it was a decree or it wasn't a decree, fair enough. We don't actually know. It's open to interpretation. But a very, very, very small number of women have interpreted it as an instruction. And that has to be their choice. It's not his choice.
Have they interpreted, or have they been told by men what the view is on this?
Well, if they have been told by men, then it's very few men that are telling women to wear the burqa. I mean, like I said, it's a very, very small number of women. And in terms of, social interaction, I mean, there's so few women that wear it. I mean, he doesn't have a problem listening to Radio Scotland. We all listen to the radio, yet, where's that social interaction, facial expressions? We don't need them. And the other thing is,
do we not need them? We all use the nuances of each other's face in face-to-face contact.
Absolutely.
So do we not need to see each other's faces to be able to communicate clearly with each other?
Well, I mean, you see women who wear the hijab and maybe wear the jilbab, which is the cloak, but not the facial covering. Like teachers, doctors, so on and so forth. They wouldn't dream of wearing a facial covering because they know that in those types of jobs it's really, really important that the face is revealed and you see facial expression, body language, so on and so forth. But I can't understand this obsession with wanting to see women's bodies and also focusing on such a small number of women. I mean, it's absolutely tiny. And we have to ask, well, why? If you want to make the world a better place, surely, make a contribution towards that.
Samina, what do you think's behind this? Because, I read out a list of countries at the top. We've got Quebec now, we've got France, Belgium, Bulgaria and Netherlands. There's a head of steam gathering on this. What do you think lies behind that?
I think what's happening, you've seen all the sensationalism in the media, particularly newspapers, in terms of terrorism. What they're doing is they're conflating two issues. Women wearing, Islam and extremism and terrorism. But what we know about this, from a leaked MI5 report, actually, that there's, which was based on hundreds of case studies of people who carried out terrorist attacks, that it's a very small religiosity is a very small factor in terms of who carries out terrorist attacks. In fact, what they found was that most people who carried out terrorist attacks weren't actually very religious. Look at the Paris attackers. They were involved in prostitution, so on and so forth. Khalid Massoud, his mother did not wear a burqa. He was a London attacker just recently. He was actually a convert to Islam. I don't know whether he was brought up in a religious family, but it definitely wasn't an Islamic family. So you have to, it's very difficult. It's very important not to buy into all this hysteria and be a bit critical about it and think about it.
But if these barriers exist, Samina, isn't the way to break them down and get better communication between communities to take away a barrier? And a veil is always going to be a barrier between people speaking to each other and communicating.
But we're talking about a tiny, tiny number of women. It's a very, very small number of women. It's like the burkini ban in France, right? For example, the burkini ban in France. Now, how is that going to impact women? Well, I'll tell you how it's going to impact women. It's not going to make women, Muslim women, say, hey, I want to go to the beach, I'm just going to wear a bikini. No, that's not going to happen. It's actually going to stop women going to the beach and taking their kids. Now, is that good for integration or is that bad for integration?
Paigham, if it does involve such a small number of people, why are you so bothered about it?
Well, first of all, Samina's example of speaking on the radio or listening to the radio is a very, very poor example. And as far as the interpretation of the Quran goes, can Samina or anyone else show me where in the Quran is the burqa referred to or the face covering referred to? Which verse is it in the Quran? There isn't any verse. So to apply and say it's a religious decree is totally wrong. And the next major point is, how can Muslim men meet other women who are not veiled and treat them respectfully and yet not give the same respectful treatment to the women in their own community? Now, the Quran forbids groundless suspicion of any description, so why only women should be presumed guilty without evidence? And it's not just a tiny number. You see an increasing number of women wearing the burqa or wearing a full veil. And I've been living in Scotland for a very, very long time, and there never used to be any women. Now there are much more women, and this is increasing all the time. And they're calling it Islamic, and it's not Islamic, and it's not in the Quran.
But if they believe it is, isn't it Islamophobic to attack them and to try and get them to stop wearing it?
No, they can believe what they like, but it's not Islamic. They have to show that it's Islamic. The Quran is a criteria, and it doesn't say that in the Quran, so why are they saying it's Islamic?
Samina, this all comes down to interpretation, doesn't it?
Actually, on one level, it can come down to interpretation. On another level, what has it got to do with anybody, what women wear? You know, if a woman, it's her choice. If she wants to interpret, you know, whatever reason she has for wearing a burqa, let her wear it. It's her choice. It is not up to any man whether either to make her wear it or to make her take it off. Now, I think that is the bottom line.
Can I come in here just for a minute?
Yeah, on you go.
Well, for Samina to say that, why do people care what women wear? Well, in fact, people do care what people wear in public. The British law does place restrictions on how people can appear in public. You may recall that in 2005, it was a man travelled from Land's End to John O'Groats naked, and he was arrested. So these are the two extremes. One is completely naked and one is completely covered. Now, the law places restrictions on how people can appear in public. Both extremes are wrong, and both extremes, we need to find a middle road of modesty, not extremism.
Interesting debate. Your views on it. 80295. Samina, we're out of time, I'm afraid. The Samina Akhtar, their former director at the Muslim Women's Resource Centre, Amina, and Scottish Muslim author